Welcome to episode 7 of 2 Cents Tuesday. Before I go any further, I want to express my heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of police officer Nathan Timmett, as well as the family and friends of the other 13 homicide victims for 2022. This scourge of violent crime must be dealt with through a comprehensive, well-thought-out set of short-term, medium-term, and long-term measures. We cannot continue to lose our sons and daughters in this manner. I will return to this subject in a subsequent 2 Cents Tuesday. Today, however, I want to look at the subject of energy security. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused world oil prices to soar to their highest levels since 2008. Yesterday, both Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate hit US $130.50 per barrel, which is their highest selling price since July 2008. Analysts at Bank of America said oil prices could climb as high as US $200 per barrel this year. JP Morgan predicts a price of US $185 per barrel this year, with Mitsubishi Financial Group predicting an increase to US $180 per barrel, which they say would cause a global recession. An economist at Singapore's OCBC Bank suggests that if the supply tightness does not ease, oil prices may exceed their previous record highs, with Brent crude trading above US $200 per barrel. This is because Russia is the world's largest exporter of crude and oil products combined, with exports equaling 7% of global supply. Therefore, any sanctions or restrictions that affect the supply of Russian oil will have serious economic implications across the globe. In St. Lucia, like so many other countries in the Caribbean, we are almost entirely dependent on imported fuels like diesel, gasoline, and cooking gas for our energy needs. Lucia, which provides us with electricity to power our homes, our offices, our hotels, our restaurants, our bars, our rum shops, our supermarkets, and other commercial establishments, generates almost all of its electricity from diesel using imported fuel. The solar farm in Beaufort produces only 3.2 megawatts of electricity, which is less than 5% of the average daily peak demand for electricity in St. Lucia. According to the Electricity Supply Act, Lucia is authorized to pass on to its consumers the cost of the fuel it uses to generate electricity in the form of a fuel cost adjustment factor. This fuel surcharge, as it is more commonly known, reflects the difference between the average current price of fuel and the price of that fuel in the preceding year. For example, in our February bills, the fuel cost adjustment that Lucia used for domestic consumers was 9 cents per kilowatt hour. The adjustment that will be used for March bills is 11.6 cents per kilowatt hour, already reflecting the increase in the global cost of oil. While the base energy tariff, which is what Lucia uses and charges to recover its operating costs, to finance new investments, and to provide a return to its shareholders, which, by the way, is guaranteed by law, is set on an annual basis, the fuel surcharge or fuel cost adjustment changes as the price of fuel changes. Therefore, the longer this war between Russia and Ukraine lasts, and the more these sanctions against Russia increase and take effect, the higher we can expect the price of oil to rise on the world market. And sadly, the more we will have to pay for electricity in St. Lucia. This will have serious financial consequences for everyone, from the domestic user of electricity, like you and me, to the manufacturers, hotels, and business places that are high volume consumers of electricity. We are all just slowly starting to recover from the negative economic impacts of COVID-19. Our business places are just beginning to bounce back from the most brutal 18 to 24 months they have ever experienced. The last thing any of us needs is to have to pay more for electricity for an extended period. Unfortunately, this is precisely what is currently staring us in the face. But it did not have to be this way. 6 years ago, St. Lucia was one of the Caribbean leaders in the transition away from an oil-dependent economy to one that uses renewable sources of energy. We had aggressively embarked on the rewriting of the Electricity Supply Act to make it possible for independent power producers, or IPPs as they are called, to generate electricity from renewable sources and sell that electricity back to Lucia. Under the Electricity Supply Act, Lucia has an 80-year monopoly for the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. One of my last acts, pun intended, before I demitted office as Energy Minister, was to pilot the passage of an amendment to the Electricity Supply Act that made it possible for independent power producers to generate electricity from solar, wind, geothermal, or other renewable sources and sell that electricity to Lucia. I also piloted the bill that established the National Utilities Regulatory Commission, or NUC, which has the responsibility for regulating the operations of WASCO, Lucia, and any entities involved in the generation or supply of electricity, and critically, for establishing the tariffs at which Lucia would purchase electricity from independent power producers and sell that electricity to its various categories of consumers. However, those were supposed to be just the start of several changes to the existing legislation. We had contracted a legal consultant who had drafted new legislation for a new electricity supply bill. There would be new licensing regulations with templates for generation, transmission, and distribution, templates for applications, licensing procedures, and licensing classification, new customer service standards regulations, wiring regulations, including safety, technical, and design parameters for the wiring of domestic, commercial, and industrial applications, new inspection and testing procedures, application procedures, and forms, new electrical licensing authority regulations, new interconnection regulations, including a grid code, co-location, infrastructure access, and infrastructure sharing, new utility operations regulations, including single-phase and three-phase compliance standards, right-of-way leave, safety standards, reserve generation capacity, new tariff regulations, including wholesale and retail tariffs for fossil fuel and non-fossil fuel or renewable energy generation, a new dispute resolution mechanism, new anti-competitive regulations to include limiting pricing, market abuse, and prevent price fixing, new regulations on standard term and conditions for the supply of electricity, including geographic coverage obligations, and new fees regulations. Sadly, 6 years later, none of these new pieces of legislation has seen the light of day. The NUC has not been given the full authority to do its important work, and the legislative framework that is necessary for the important transition to renewable sources of electricity to take place is completely absent. This means there is no clarity for any investor, local or foreign, looking to invest in the energy sector. Those who follow developments in the energy sector prior to 2016 would know that we were well on our way to having a wind farm built in Denmark on lands close to the Border Lake Correctional Facility. The proposed 12-megawatt wind farm, which was to have been a joint venture with a reputable and experienced wind developer out of Texas, would have generated energy that was equivalent to 11% of Lucia's annual supply, powered roughly 19,475 homes every year, and reduced the volume of diesel that Lucia purchased every year by almost 2 million gallons. This important project was to have been completed by the 1st of September 2017, over 4 years ago. Would also have provided significant employment in a wide range of areas during the 9 months of construction and during its lifespan, which was projected at a minimum of 25 years. Sadly, This project was not supported by the previous administration, and the developer, Mr. Steve DeWolf, died in April 2018 when one of the two vintage World War II planes he owned and piloted crashed with him on board in Texas. With Steve DeWolf's death, our country lost an opportunity to make a significant transition away from imported diesel fuel. Then there was this LED street lighting project that had been finalized with the Caribbean Development Bank, or CDB. Under this project, the CDB would have lent St. Lucia $9.55 million under very highly concessional terms to replace our entire stock of inefficient and energy-hungry 22,000 high-pressure sodium and mercury vapor lamps with LED streetlights. This was supposed to have resulted in annual savings in street lighting energy consumption of 5,300 megawatt hours per year, annual savings of 4,321 tons of carbon dioxide, an annual reduction of 363,000 imported gallons of fuel, and annual savings to the government of St. Lucia, net of its debt service obligations for that loan, of approximately 3.1 million EC dollars for 15 years. The economic rate of return on this project was 17%. The project also included a grant of $30,000 to Lucia for it to allow it to examine its vulnerability to climate change and extreme weather events, and to assist it with long-term infrastructure development plan. I first raised this project with the Caribbean Development Bank at a meeting in Miami in October 2015, and they were immediately excited by the prospect of this project. They proposed that St. Lucia be used as a pilot to show how this could be rolled out in other Caribbean countries. The CDB board enthusiastically approved this project at its 271st board meeting in Jamaica on the 16th of May 2016. All the LED streetlights were supposed to have been installed by December 2018. That's over 3 years ago. Unfortunately, the previous government, in its wisdom, rejected this project, and sadly, once again, we missed an opportunity to reduce our reliance, our dependence on imported diesel. Inexplicably, the then government then proceeded to enter into a contract with a foreign company on the terms and conditions that were significantly worse than the CDB arrangement for the installation of LED streetlights. Your guess is as good as mine for the motivation behind this. In 2016, St. Lucia was also very advanced with exploratory work for the generation of geothermal energy from our geothermal resource in Soufrière. The geotechnical studies had shown that we could have extracted energy outside of the no-build zones of our Pito management area. This meant that our prestigious World Heritage status would not have been impacted or compromised by the geothermal development. We had secured funding and technical support from the World Bank, the New Zealand government, and CIDSDO, with the Caribbean Development Bank also indicating a strong interest in coming on board with financing. Rough calculations suggested that St. Lucia has 170 megawatts of geothermal energy potential, which is almost 3 times our current peak demand for electricity. In other words, our geothermal energy has the potential to completely eradicate our need for imported oil products. Unfortunately, over the last 5 years, we have not made much or any progress with developing this resource. While our sister island of Dominica, just last month, signed a contract to drill 2 new wells for a 7-megawatt geothermal plant. Another missed opportunity for our country to reduce our reliance on imported fuel and to drastically lower the cost of electricity to consumers, which currently stands at just around 30 US cents per kilowatt hour, and which, as I said earlier, will increase as the Russia-Ukraine war continues. We had also started to install solar photovoltaic panels, or PV panels as they're known, on government buildings so that we could lower the utility bills paid by the agencies that occupy these buildings. And again, reduce on the amount of diesel Lucia needs to import to generate electricity. Solar PV panels were installed on the Wellness Center and on NEMO headquarters, with the kind support of funding from the Taiwanese government that my ministry negotiated in 2012 on the Sustainable Energy Project. However, I've been reliably informed that these facilities have not been properly maintained over the last 5 years and are not operating at the expected efficiencies. Moreover, the planned installations of solar PV panels on a number of other government buildings have not taken place. Finally, in order to ensure that our energy transition was backed by sound empirical evidence, we had commissioned the Rocky Mountain Institute, the Carbon War Room, and the Clinton Climate Initiative to produce a national energy transition strategy that explored several scenarios to move our country away from our dependence on imported fossil fuels. This looked at options ranging from a 19% penetration of renewable energy by the year 2025 to a 75% penetration by 2025. The latter through a combination of 23 megawatts of solar energy, 12 megawatts of wind energy, 30 megawatts of geothermal energy, 19 megawatt hours of battery storage, and the rest in diesel. The conclusion of this work was that we would have seen a reduction in electricity rates and a 20 to 25% stabilization in externally driven electricity price volatility. Again, none of this has materialized because of an absence of commitment and political will. All of this indicates why it is critically important that we revive our energy transition program and take bold steps to move our country away from its costly reliance on fossil fuels. We have an abundance of wind and sunshine in our country. Various reports have suggested that we have the capacity to generate as much as 40 megawatts of energy from solar photovoltaic, 36 megawatts from wind, and 170 megawatts from geothermal. We can move to complete independence from imported oil for electricity generation and transportation. And none of this will affect the viability of Lucia, which, by the way, is one of the most efficient electric utility companies in the Caribbean. In fact, by moving our transportation fleet to electric vehicles and by embarking on a coal ironing program at our seaports, we can increase the demand for electricity, which will increase Lucia's profitability and viability. For those who do not know, coal ironing entails supplying our seaports with electricity, generated in this case from renewable energy, and insisting that the cruise ships and other large vessels that berth at these ports switch off their oil-powered engines and take power from our ports when they berth in our ports. This helps these shipping companies to decrease their use of fossil fuels and reduce their carbon footprint, something they are under increasing pressure internationally to do. It reduces the emission of pollution from the exhaust of these ships into the air around Castries and Beaufort. It means that you and I will breathe cleaner air when these ships are docked. And it provides Lucia with a lucrative new source of revenue. It is estimated that a large cruise ship can use between 12 and 16 megawatts while berthed in port. This is 20 to 25% of the peak demand for energy in St. Lucia in a day, sold to just one ship. If we have multiple ships in port, the revenue earned by Lucia would be tremendous. Lucia currently sells electricity to large volume users at a rate that is almost 20% higher than what it charges low volume domestic users. This means that the more money Lucia makes from these large volume producers, the better for us because it can cost subsidies. Therefore, we must strive for national energy security. To achieve energy security, we need to quickly diversify our sources of energy. We must bring back the wind farm on track. We must increase the generation of electricity from solar, both at the utility and distributed rooftop levels, and accelerate the development of geothermal energy. Also, we must pass the supporting legislation that has been sitting dormant in draft form for the past 5 years. Fortunately, there is an appetite in the investment market for renewable energy projects, particularly in a country like St. Lucia, where the cost of electricity is high, which almost guarantees a favorable economic rate of return on any investment. When we move away from importing oil products to generate electricity, our hotels, our small business owners, our restaurants, our bars, our manufacturers no longer have to worry about fluctuating oil prices and increasing energy costs as they're doing right now. Additionally, the cost of electricity will reduce significantly, and our value-added agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing sectors will immediately become more competitive, much more competitive. The household consumer will have more money in his or her pocket because of their ability, because of the electricity bill, which will be much lower. This is a win-win-win situation for everyone. All it takes is vision, leadership, political will, and commitment. Thank you for viewing another 2 Cents Tuesday. Have a safe and productive week. Goodbye.